All right. Hopefully you can all hear me. Um, I am Dr. Jones. I'm Robin Jones. I am the director of the integrated learning major. So I'm basically the director of the undergraduate program for neuroscience at Syracuse University. Our executive director, who couldn't be with us tonight, she's actually at a national conference. She is Sandra Hewitt, and she's sort of she's the executive director, so that means that she is above me, so she's my boss actually, but she also oversees the graduate program as well. So it's the two of us, and then we actually have one other main faculty member in neuroscience, and her name is Jennifer Cook, and she is an instructor in the program as well as one of the primary advisors. So myself and Jen both do probably 99% of the advising for neuroscience. And so we can talk about how that works as I go through this presentation. Feel free to put questions in the chat, or you can even just shout out questions as we go through. And then at the end, of course, I'll give more time to ask questions as we're going through, excuse me, after I finish this short presentation. So basically, neuroscience is what we call an integrated learning major. And what that means is that you actually have to pair this with another major. So it's a little different than a traditional double major in that you would pair it with another major, but it doesn't require as many credits. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. There are about, on average, we seem to keep an average of about 225 students in the program. And that goes across all 4 years. So it's 225 students total. It is actually one of the larger majors on campus, even though it is not a standalone major. It actually has a very high number of students. So psychology is one of the biggest majors on campus, followed by biology. And we're pretty up there with 225. So we do have a lot of students in the major. And I would say that, geez, probably, I don't know, probably somewhere in the ballpark of 75 to 85% of students that start the program actually complete the program. So students, fall off for one reason or another. They might decide that they don't like neuroscience after they start the program. They just say, no, this isn't for me, which of course is what college is about. And, they just find other interests and what have you. So, but most people that start the program do finish it. So we have at least 60% or more of our students do research at some point within their career. That research might be mostly neuroscience based, but it usually is found somewhere in their, what we call their home department, which is the primary major that you would pair this major with. So if, for example, if you were going to major in psychology and neuroscience, you might be doing neuroscientific research under the umbrella of psychology. So you might be doing, say, work on memory or something like that, which would fall under the umbrella of neuroscience, but also under the umbrella of, what's the word I'm looking for? Psychology. So what we do, I would say a good majority, but not everybody does research. So there's plenty of opportunities both with faculty that affiliate with the program itself. There are plenty of opportunities with faculty that are working on topics around neuroscience, but may not necessarily be affiliated with the program. So our associated faculty may or may not affiliate with the program depending on what kind of time they have, how much they feel that they focus on neuroscience versus how much we feel they focus on neuroscience. So there are a lot of opportunities for doing research. And then students will go down to upstate. It's SUNY Upstate is the medical school down the hill from us. And a lot of students will do research there as well with faculty there that are working sometimes on bench research and sometimes on more applied research, working on patient studies and things like that. About 50% of our students study abroad. So even with a full primary major and the integrated learning major, the neuro integrated learning major, still students do still find time and a way to study abroad. So we do have a lot. In fact, it was really fun this semester. The first time, because of Zoom, this semester, for the first time, I was actually able to Zoom with my advisees that, excuse me, we're at registration time. So the advisees that had questions about registration, I could Zoom with them in other countries. It was really cool. So they'd be like, hey, check it out, I'm in Florence. And they'd be like, I could see Florence in the background. It was a lot of fun. So it's really neat, but a lot of our students do study abroad. So I think I only met with juniors by requirement. Juniors had to meet with me this semester. And I think at least 3, or it was maybe 4 of them that I met with personally were in another country. So it was really neat. And then we have 3 core faculty. I talked about that before. So it's Dr. Hewitt, myself, and Dr. Cook. But as I was talking about, we have many contributing faculty from across different departments. And so if you go to our website, which is neuroscience.syr.edu, and you go to people, you can see the huge list of faculty that actually affiliate with the neuroscience program from across the different departments. So probably our biggest representations are biology, psychology, communication sciences and disorders. We're starting to accumulate more public health faculty that are associated with the program. And I feel like I'm forgetting somebody, but you can see that there are a lot of different faculty from a lot of different departments. So, and that seems to, it's kind of exciting, but that seems to increase every year as we hire new faculty at the university. Neuroscience is a focus because it's so interdisciplinary. It is a focus in lots of different departments from many different angles. So it's really interesting for students, and it's exciting for us to hire and include new faculty from different programs. All right, let's see. I can never figure out how this thing advances on Zoom. There we go. So what is an integrated learning major? So the way this major works is that, as I said, you pair it with another primary major. So you might come in, and so when you come in as a freshman, you might say, well, I know I want to do neuroscience, but I don't know what to do as my other major. And that's okay. You can still declare neuroscience without declaring your other major right away. You can figure out what you want your other major to be later on. But that other major can be lots of different things. And I think, let me just double check that I put a slide in here. Yes, I did, on what those are. So I'll come back to that. It is a double major, but it's fewer credits. So at the end of the program, you will end up, or excuse me, at the end of your 4 years, you will end up with a degree that says you have a Bachelor of Science in Philosophy and a Bachelor of Science in Neuroscience. So you do get 2 degrees at the end, but the nice thing about this program is that it's only 24 credits. So a traditional major usually runs about 48 credits. A minor runs at about 18 credits. So you can see it's like a little bit, it's about 6 credits more than a minor, but you get a whole second degree in that major. So it's really kind of neat that it works out that way, because it's kind of doing double major for less work, which is kind of nice for students. So we sort of refer to these as a T major. So the top of the T obviously is the breadth and then the depth. So taking the electives in the program and the core courses in the program give you a breadth of knowledge on neuroscience, but your primary major would be the major that kind of gives you a more in-depth look at neuroscience, depending on what your primary major is. And so these electives that you take outside, so you'll see as we go through the requirements for the program that you would take these 2 elective courses from a list of approved electives, but they would have to be outside your primary major so that we're sure that you're getting exposure to more about neuroscience than just what's in your primary major. So the program, as I said, is 24 credits, and this is a list of the courses that you would take. So these first 2, they look very similar, and the courses actually are somewhat similar in that they cover a lot of the same topics, but they cover them from completely different perspectives. So introduction to excuse me, I'm just getting over like a upper respiratory thing, thankfully not COVID, but my voice does not want to come back. So introduction to neuroscience is the biological side of neuroscience. So it's looking at a lot of the cellular components, signaling mechanisms, but then a lot of the anatomy and physiology of the sensory system. So smell, taste, hearing, vision, then skin sensations, so somatosensation, motor movement, and autonomic function, which is really just the brain signaling to your organs to tell them how to work. So we cover a lot of the same topics in that biologically based course with the cognitive course. So let me see if I can give you a kind of an example. So in the introduction to neuroscience course, the biology based course, for the vision topic, for example, we would talk about how the cells, the photoreceptors in the retina receive light, and how through several different chemical mechanisms, they take that light and they begin an electrical signal, and that signal is then passed via several neuron synapses to the brain. And so we talk all about what does that pathway look like? How are those chemical signals created? How are the electrical signals created? And it's the nitty gritty of how the neurons are passing information from one place to another. In the cognitive neuroscience, in that same unit on vision, you would actually start at the brain. So we don't really focus much on what's going on in the retina exactly, or even perhaps the cellular connections between the eye and the occipital lobe, but you actually start at the occipital lobe. So, okay, now I've got these signals arriving at the occipital lobe. How does the brain figure out what to do with that information and how to interpret what that is? So how does the brain figure out what a color is? How does the brain figure out, how does it recognize a face? How does it recognize an object? How does it determine if something is moving or still? So in the cognitive neuroscience course, that's more of the focus. So it's the same, you'll cover sort of the same topics, but from 2 completely different perspectives. Cognitive psychology, which sort of looks like cognitive neuroscience, is less on the neuroscience part, so less technical details and more personality, memory, that kind of thing, or cognitive science, which actually I don't know a lot about this class. It's based out of the philosophy department, but it's, from what the students tell me, it kind of likens brain mechanisms to computer mechanisms. So showing how the brain actually operates similarly to a computer and vice versa, which is pretty interesting. Advanced neuroscience is the advanced version of Introduction to Neuroscience. Cognitive neuroscience of speech and language is a course that's in the communications sciences and disorders department, so CSD department. And that course looks at basically the processes, in-depth processes of speech and language. And the whole second half of the course looks at patient case studies and understanding what went wrong in the brain and how that manifests as things like aphasia, where a patient can't communicate. Neuroscience and Society is a course that's usually taken in the senior year. along with advanced neuroscience. Doesn't have to be same time, just usually those are senior year. It is what we call a capstone course. You don't have to do a capstone project. But basically what the course is basically a discussion-based course. All of our other courses are lecture-based courses. They're more traditional, where you would go to class, you would do, whatever the professor has you doing that day in class. Usually it's either it's a lecture or it's doing some sort of applied activity in class. But Neuroscience and Society is a discussion-based course. You do papers, you do presentations. And so that class, students really enjoy this class. It gives them a chance to apply what they've learned in the other courses to what's going on in pop culture, what's going on in current events, ethics, all that kind of stuff are included in that course. So students really enjoy this course. And as the director, you hear all kinds of things, and that is one course I have literally never heard a complaint about. So students really like that class. And finally, 2 electives outside the primary major. So these 2 electives come from a list of electives. Now, do you think that I remembered to put that in here? Yes, I did. Look at this. All right. So these 2 electives would come out from outside of the primary major. So what that means is that if you're a biology major and a neuroscience major, your 2 electives towards the neuroscience program cannot be any of the ones that we allow from biology. They can go from any other topic on the list except biology. So in following with that example, if I'm a biology major, for my electives, I would not be able to take biology of aging or neuroanatomy to count towards neuroscience. I can certainly take those and count those towards my biology degree, but I just can't take them towards my neuroscience degree. But this is a list showing you, this is a subset, a very small subset of the courses that are considered approved for taking as electives. So we actually have, our real list is probably at least double this, if not triple as long as this. And I'm trying to think across the department. So there's definitely psychology and biology, public health, there's math, physics, there's linguistics, philosophy, computer science, bioengineering, electrical engineering. I may be missing one. Oh, communication sciences and disorders. So there's a lot to choose from. And honestly, we find out about new classes that would qualify for electives almost every year now. So as I was saying, we're adding new faculty to the university every year. And so, the neuroscience program may not know that someone new was hired in like marketing that's actually doing like neuromarketing courses. And so we only find out about it when a student actually takes it, or if that person reaches out to us because they'd like to be affiliated with the program. So a lot of times you'll come here and you'll be like, hey, Dr. Jones, I found this class called, A Beautiful Mind or something. I'd like to petition that to count as an elective. Do you think I could do that? And yes, as long as the course has enough neuroscience represented in it to convince the committee that it's an acceptable elective, then we will accept it. And oftentimes then we will add that to our list of currently accepted electives. So it's really easy to pick up your electives, and new things are being added all the time besides just what's on our list. So we are open to considering other things besides just the list. So what majors can be paired? So these are just a list of the most common, this is just a list of the most common primary majors that our students choose. But we have had students choose Spanish, French. I've had students majoring in communication. So, oh gosh, course. Oh, the Newhouse School, that's what I'm trying to think of. So, you know, not even within the College of Arts and Sciences. So they might be in Falk College doing exercise science and then choosing neuroscience, or they might be doing journalism. So that's becoming more popular too, is to go into scientific journalism. And so students will be in Newhouse and be a journalism major, and then along with that, pair it with neuroscience. You might be in marketing and in neuroscience. I mean, students have paired, I've had economics and neuroscience. So it really pairs well with just about anything, or maybe you just want to add it on for fun. They don't necessarily have to be connected. You just might want to add neuroscience because you're interested in it. And you also want to be a classics major, and they don't necessarily go together, but it doesn't matter. If you just want to add it, you can. Sometimes, so there are, because our program is accredited by New York State, we have to give them a list of things that we officially have approved as majors to pair with neuroscience. But even if you pick something that's not on that list, you just fill out a piece of paper and it just gets signed. It's a petition, just gets signed and accepted. So you can major in anything and major in neuroscience. But our most common majors are definitely psychology is probably our number one. Biology, biotechnology is a relatively new program. A lot of students joining up with that. Public health, chemistry, and communication sciences and disorders. So chemistry surprisingly becoming more and more popular, which is nice. And we have a medicinal chemistry major in the chemistry department, and students seem to be going for that as well. So biochemistry, we also are picking up more engineering students as well, especially in bioengineering. So, but you know, if you wanted to go into data analytics and you had the neuroscience background with that, that would be, I mean, you could be open to a lot of data analyst type positions that would be in the sciences, which would be, I think, hard roles for companies to fill. So as I said, in short, you can pair it with anything. Advising. So when you first got on, I was talking to you about how Jen and I do most of the advising ourselves. So 225 split by 2 people. So we advise on our program. We meet with our students. We meet with all of our students once a year. And then in the spring, you heard me talk about meeting with my juniors. We meet with just juniors in the spring to help make sure that you're all set for senior year in terms of the neuroscience program. So we just advise on neuroscience. We don't necessarily have knowledge about your primary major. You would have a separate advisor for your primary major who would be an expert on that. But you would be assigned an advisor when you declare. So if you declare on your way in, if you come to Syracuse and you decide to major in that right away, so you declare before you get here, as a freshman, you won't be assigned an advisor usually until around Christmas time. So the College of Arts and Sciences has a very good advising program. They want to kind of have the freshmen have an experience with just working with their College of Arts and Sciences advisor to help you get on your feet and get going strong in that first semester. So you'll just see them for that first semester. And then in the spring semester, you would be assigned an advisor in whatever majors, excuse me, you've declared. So if it's neuroscience, you'd have us. If you have a primary major or a different major, you'd have them. So you would be able to reach out to advisors in those programs and then get help with whatever you needed. But you're free to contact us anytime. So Jen and I are always, and Sandra as well, always happy to answer questions for students, even if you haven't declared yet or you haven't had either one of us assigned as an advisor, you can always contact us. So we basically are there to help you plan your neuroscience courses for the program. And as I said, we try to do regular check-ins, so at least once a year. And then if you need anything, you can always reach out to us directly, and we're happy to meet with you and help you do whatever it is you need to do. I mean, I do a ton of advising just on Dr. Jones, what should I do with my life? So I should take. All right. So hopefully you guys can still hear me. It just said I'm unstable. Okay. So our students are involved in research, as I was talking about earlier. And you can see that our faculty come from all of these different programs. See, I missed one earlier, engineering. But basically, you come in, you can start research whenever you want. You just find somebody to work with and you go for it. So basically, the way students usually find opportunities is by getting to campus. Most people don't start in their first semester, but that doesn't mean you can't. Hopefully you guys are still with me. I don't know what's going on with my internet. Okay. So our students are all very involved in research. And you basically, you get to campus, usually first semester, as I was saying, you don't join up. But you might find right away, I know I want to get into this. I identified 3 people I want to talk to, and you go talk to them. By people, I mean faculty members. And you set up appointments and you go talk to them. And that's really how you find someone to work with in terms of research. So basically, you get on the websites, you get on neuroscience website, or you get on biology website, get on engineering website, get on there, you look at their faculty, you see what topics they're doing, see if you're interested in them, and then you start reaching out to people and expressing your interest in working with them, and hearing more about their research. And some faculty will be too busy and they won't be able to take anyone else at that time, and that's okay. You just keep trying, you're going to find somebody to work with. And as I said earlier, upstate, just down the hill. It's from my office to walk to upstate, which is across our campus, then to their campus is probably 10 minutes at the most. So our students work with them very often. They take a lot of Syracuse undergraduates to work in their labs, which is nice. So you can always contact people down there by looking on their website, and just finding people you're interested in and reaching out. All right. So this is a list of funding. So undergraduate research support. So when you go to do research, you may find that you're able to apply for grants to help you carry out your research. So we have the honors program, which provides stipends for students to do research with their principal investigators or the faculty member they're working with. We have distinction programs in most departments, which means you do a research project for that major, and then you would graduate with distinction. The McNair, LSAM, and CSTEP are awards that generally go to underrepresented students. And then SOURCE is a funding supply that goes towards, a lot of times it's for summer research. So if you want to stay for the summer, you can apply for these SOURCE grants, and often you can get enough money to stay for the summer when normally, you might not have had, what's the word I'm looking for, financial aid to cover that. So there's a lot of little funding resources on campus. You just have to ask about them, and people will direct you towards how to get there. Honestly, I think most of the students that I've had, I know my students that have applied for McNair, LSAM, I have not had one apply for CSTEP, and SOURCE, I think they've all gotten them. So they're very, Syracuse is very generous with funding for students to be able to carry out research and stay in the summer if they wish. So a common question, what can I do with this bachelor's degree in neuroscience? So the reality of it is that the way that the world is becoming is that graduate school is becoming more and more common. So most of our students do end up going to graduate school at some point. So they may not go directly to graduate school. They may wait. A lot of students take what we call a gap year, where they find employment somewhere, or they go to a post-baccalaureate program, especially if they're going to go to medical school. They'll go to this post-baccalaureate program, maybe to help them prep better for the MCAT test or whatever. So most of our students are in either graduate school or they're working. We have several students at medical school. We have several students that are doing graduate school for neuroscience or other. So they may be in graduate programs in their primary majors. They may be in a clinical psychology program. They may be in, so we had a student that was a public health major, and she is in graduate school for MPH. So she's not doing anything necessarily with the neuroscience part. And we had another student who graduated with a degree from the Maxwell School in Policy Studies. And she is, I want to say she's in Africa doing government work there. So, you know, different. So some students use the neuroscience, some students use their primary major, some students find a way that they both work together. So they're doing both, a little of both. We have, of course, the professional training schools, PT, occupational therapy, physician assistant. So there's students more commonly now, PAs showing up more and more. And then, you know, a list of typical careers. So either careers that are occurring right after the degree or careers that are occurring after an additional graduate school. In terms of working, I have a lot of students that finish and become research assistants. So a lot of them go into, so I'm thinking of two particular ones right off the top of my head. One is a research assistant at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And the other one is a research assistant at, it's Thomas Jefferson School of Medicine. And I think it's like whatever hospital is affiliated. So both those students are actually in Philadelphia. But they are working as a research assistant, which means that they carry out research for a principal investigator. They're both in clinical, so they're doing clinical research assistant work right now. Both of them applying to medical school, so they took gap years. Another student applying to medical school, she took a 2-year gap year and she trained to be an EMT to get clinical hours to be even more. She already had fabulous GPA, but she's trying to get clinical hours up for applying to medical school. So I have and I could go on, but I know that I have another graduate student. She graduated 2 years ago and she's at McGill actually studying neuroscience in graduate school. All right. So Joshua, you asked me what majors would you recommend if someone wanted to become a surgeon with a specialty in neuroscience or even become a neurosurgeon? So that's a good question. We get that a lot. And so obviously neuroscience kind of is good for that, but what would you pair with it? I'm assuming is what you really are wondering. And honestly, medical schools will take anything. So the obvious one is biology. Just because it does include most of your prerequisites for applying to medical school. But I have a ton of students applying to medical school who are psychology majors, medicinal chemistry majors, biochemistry majors. I had a student 2 years ago, and I keep meaning to, I was just thinking of her the other day, actually, to check in with her to see, she was a French major. And then she took the pre-medical requirements and did neuroscience. So, I mean, and she went abroad twice. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting, but people seem to fit all this in. I don't know how that you guys do it, but they do. So, you know, I think for medical school, there's a, what do I want to say? It's like a pre-med advising office. It's the health advising, health professions advising. That's it. So they they are a special office that you can go to actually get advising on what's the best way to approach applying to medical school. But they will tell you the same thing, that as long as you get the prerequisite courses, you can major in whatever you want. You stand out a little bit if you don't major in biology, just because everyone does that, because it's kind of the easiest path, but it honestly doesn't matter what your major is. They'll accept you if you meet the criteria. So it's kind of up to you what really interests you. And if you want to do something different, you can do that too. So, mostly I would say of course, the obvious is biology, but beyond that, it could be anything you really want it to be. So I hope that answers your question. All right, let's see. All right, that was good timing, because that was the end of my presentation. So any questions? I see another one coming in. Does the Honors College curriculum align with the neuroscience courses? So the honors program, is that what you're asking me about? I think so. The honors program, yes, okay. So the honors program, basically, they have their own sort of agenda. And you know what? This is a great question, and I'm going to make a note to myself. So thank you for asking me this. I don't know which of our courses, if any, in neuroscience count towards the honors program. So they have specific classes that you have to take they have a prefix HNR, so they're specifically honors courses. But I will say this, the honors program does require you to take certain types of classes across the curriculum. So they want you to take like a communication heavy course. They want you to take like a critical thinking heavy course, that kind of thing. So a lot of the neuroscience courses actually would qualify under all of those categories. So there are classes that you can take that I do think count towards the check boxes that you have to check to take for honors. The biggest thing I think I would say about the intersection of the two is that many times the research that students do for their honors project will end up being on a topic that is in neuroscience. So the courses have helped feed the knowledge that you need to understand the research. If that makes sense. Let's see. What study abroad opportunities, if any, are in neuros? Oh, okay. So there are a couple of, so let me put it this way. Most of the schools that are, the way abroad works is that there are schools that are direct Syracuse campuses. So for example, in Florence, Syracuse has an actual Syracuse campus in Florence. That school doesn't have neuroscience as part of their program. Ireland, I think, has a Syracuse campus. That one also does not have neuroscience, but we also have what are called world partners. So I want to say it's either Sweden or Norway, I think, that have one of those two. Stockholm, I know it now, it's Stockholm. So Stockholm has very, very, very many neuroscience courses. Australia does. I think there's a world partner in New Zealand that does. And I'm trying to think if any other of students that I know that have been abroad, I'm trying to think if there's anyone else that has taken neuroscience courses, but to my knowledge right now, those are the ones that really offer enough neuroscience for you to take them. So I'm just thinking of another, and I think she's in Stockholm. And she's studying in Stockholm and she's doing a lot of neuroscience. So most of the students they just go and take their humanities courses to fulfill the arts and sciences, liberal arts requirements. They usually go and take some of those classes because they're they're a little less demanding so that students have time to travel and see things while they're there, because of course you want to experience that too. But some students do go and take neuroscience courses, but you can always reach out to the abroad program and ask them that question, and ask them if they can let you know a list of the world partner programs. And they may or may not know how many of those world partner programs offer neuroscience, but if you know what the world partner programs are, you can visit their websites and then see if they offer neuroscience. Up to my knowledge, none of the actual SU abroad, their actual SU campuses, offer neuroscience at this time, but I do know that the world partners do. Let's see, Diane, how many kids do you see majoring in neuroscience and business? So I'm trying to think. So far I haven't had tons and tons, just a handful probably. But I would say that that's absolutely doable, because it's kind of in that way it's kind of a nice pairing, because business students are not often dealing with tons of lab courses to try and schedule around. So I can also see, as I was talking about with data analytics, understanding sort of the neuroscience behind business decisions, it would be very, very, very beneficial. The other thing is that it's very difficult for, what am I trying to say? Pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies to find people with a business degree that know enough science to understand what's going on at their place of business. And so there's often a lot of job openings for people who can do both things. So if you know science and know business, there's a lot of opportunities that that don't exist for just your typical business major. Let's see, this is a general question. What's the process for applying for the honors? So that I don't know. So to apply to honors, you might find their contact information, or even contact admissions, and they should be able to give you that information. I actually don't know how students go about getting into the honors program. So you might reach out to admissions and ask them first, and then they may point you in another direction, or they might be able to ask or give you the answer to that. And yes, I know of at least one student that majored in neuroscience and policy studies, and she is the one that's currently in Africa doing government work for the US government. In fact, we just had an update from her, and I don't know that her work technically has much to do with neuroscience, but she is really enjoying what she's doing. And it's policy work, but she's somehow in Africa doing this, so it's pretty cool. Other questions that I can answer? All right, if we are good, if you don't have any, I have another question. When do students typically conduct research? So I can answer this in two ways. So if you're asking me when do they typically conduct research over the 4 years, it's usually students will start in the sophomore year and then work sophomore, junior, senior year. Some students will start in their freshman year, and it's not because you can't do it as a freshman, it's just their preference. So most students, they find when they first get here, it's a little, there's a lot to get used to. There's a lot I got to figure out how to keep a schedule. I got to figure out when to study, how to study. I got to try and balance all my coursework. I'm also completely autonomous with no parents looking over my shoulder. So I have to learn how to balance my social life with all that. So a lot of students when they first get here, they don't feel ready to take on the extra responsibility. Some students already got all that locked down and they're able to do it right away. So they can jump into research immediately. They feel comfortable with it. They feel like they're ready for it. So they do. The other way I can answer that question is, when do they do it? Meaning, if I'm taking all these classes, what time do I have to do research? So that is another consideration and why a lot of people don't start in their freshman year. So, you're in class, so if you're taking 5 classes or more, 3 hours a week per class if you're not taking labs. So that's 15 hours right there that you're just in class time. So most students will put in early on in the projects, students will often put in just whatever they can between classes. So they might come in, like, let's say on Tuesday, I have class from 8 to 11, and then I have class again from 3 to 5. So I might go into the lab between 11 and 3. Now, and I say lab because I'm a scientist, so it could be, you could be doing other types of research and it might not work the same way. It may not have to go into a lab, right? You might be doing work that's online, or you might be doing work that's more writing. So it's different depending on what you're working on. But if you're going into a lab, like I might go in between 11 and 3, and then while I'm in there, I might have a little bit of work to do, but then I'm able to do some of my homework during that time as well, because I'm setting up a little experiment, and then I have to wait 2 hours. So during that 2 hours, I might be able to, work on some homework or study or whatever. And then, so I have class, what I think I said, like 8 to 11, right? And then 3 to 5. So then at 5 o'clock, I might come back, or I might not. I might go home for the night, do my work. Next day, whatever my schedule is, I try to fit some in. I would say students on average in any given week, and I'm talking about primarily in a type of a science lab or a psychology lab, you might work probably on average 5 or 10 hours a week, depending on your PI. Some PIs in science are very demanding. So that's something you need to find out before you join their lab. So you really want to get a fair understanding of how much they actually expect you to be there doing work. So you should definitely, when you interview a faculty member about their research, you also want to find out for yourself if it's a good fit for you as well, and how much time you feel like you can put in. So I hope that helped answer that. Internship opportunities to get my hours to get into medical school. So I think you're talking about clinical hours. So no, so there are not opportunities to necessarily gain clinical hours outside of the SU ambulance. So you can train for the SU ambulance and work for the SU ambulance. We have our whole ambulance thing. And I have several students that work on that. So they train to be EMTs, and then actually think you can go all the way up to paramedic. And so, they either drive the ambulance, they see the patients, they, bring them to the hospital, that whole thing. Otherwise, clinical hours are basically on your own. So, of course, upstate is right there. So in Syracuse, I don't know where you're from, but in the area, right, literally in a row, you have SUNY Upstate. Right next door to it is Krause Hospital. Right next door to that is the VA. So there's 3 hospitals right there that you can get volunteer hours in, shadow, whatever it is you want to do. There's also one other hospital. Well, there's really 2. There's one a lot farther that's community, but it's still in the city. And then not quite as far, but not within walking distance, is St. Joseph's Hospital as well. So there's, 5 hospitals there that you can contact to try to get a chance to get in there to get hours. But otherwise, no, there's not like offered internships in that. Yes, so can research be done during the summertime? So yes, absolutely, you can do research during the summer here. Most PIs will do anything they can to help you get money to be able to stay in the summer. If they have money, they will sometimes just pay for you to stay in the summer if they have enough money. Some PIs will pay you, some won't. So it just depends on who you're doing research with. Some are generous and have enough funding to be able to actually pay you. Some do not and can only cover like your living expenses or whatever for this summer. But those funding opportunities that I was talking about, the source grants, a lot of those are given in order to help students be able to stay for the summer and do their research. If living expenses are not an issue. For example, if you're able to, so I'm so far out of going to college that I don't remember how financial aid exactly works for the summertime. But if you can get financial aid for the summertime, there isn't a PI in this world that would turn down their students staying for the summer to do research. So you can absolutely do research in the summer here. Anything else? So feel free to anytime to reach out to me, Dr. Cook or Dr. Hewitt. You see our emails are there, and the neuroscience at syr.edu is there as well. That's our neuroscience inbox. So that's just our general email. So if you email that, you get any one of the three of us, or you could email any of us directly. So I hope that that helps give you a lot of information about the program, and we would love to see you in the fall. And please feel free to reach out anytime between now and then with any questions.